Imagine this: a town of nearly 2,000 souls, living ordinary lives in rural Illinois, where the river bends like a black serpent. Shops bustled, children laughed, and the church bell marked the passage of every hour. But on one night in 1912, when the clock struck 12, that bell tolled in a way no one had heard before, sharp, metallic, almost broken. And when the sun rose the next morning, there was no town left. Not a single man, woman, or child. Homes stood with doors hanging open. Lanterns still burned on kitchen tables. Food half-eaten lay spoiling on plates. Yet silence swallowed everything. The people were gone, as if erased from existence. You weren't meant to hear this story. You weren't meant to know this town even existed. And yet, here you are, being pulled into a history that was scrubbed from maps, from records, from memory. Why was it buried? Who had the power to erase a town, and why? If you search the archives, you'll find nothing. No official record of a disappearance. The state lists only farmland where that town should be. Even the county courthouse keeps files that skip directly from 1911 to 1913, as if the year 1912 never touched this soil. But locals whisper a different story, one told by candlelight and passed like a curse. They say the midnight bell rang 13 times instead of 12. They say it wasn't just metal on metal, but a scream inside the tone, a vibration that made dogs claw at the earth and babies shriek until their mothers smothered them with quilts. After that night, silence. A silence so thick even birds avoided the sky above. But here's what unsettles me most. 3 decades later, a farmer unearthed fragments of parish records, pages charred at the edges but still legible. One entry read only, "They were taken." The bell was the key. What could that possibly mean? To understand, we must step back. You see, bells are not innocent instruments. Across cultures, bells have been used to ward off spirits, to bind rituals, even to hypnotize entire congregations into states of surrender. The Catholic Church once declared the consecration of bells an exorcism, binding them to drive away demons, but also to control minds through rhythm, through sound, through fear. In ancient Mesopotamia, bells were weapons of psychological warfare. And in the 1800s, American industrialists studied the frequencies of metal and sound, knowing some tones could disrupt thought, even fracture reality for those exposed long enough. What if the midnight bell in that town was not struck by accident, but by design? What if someone, or something, turned a familiar sound into a weapon? If that's true, the people didn't leave. They were pulled. The question is, pulled where? The last man to claim he saw the town before it vanished was a traveling salesman, passing through the region in early spring of 1912. His diary, discovered long after his death, describes a community uneasy, distrustful, and strangely rehearsed. He wrote of a church congregation that moved in perfect unison, like marionettes on invisible strings. He said the preacher spoke words that didn't sound like English, yet everyone nodded as if they understood. When he asked about the town's name, no one would answer directly. They called it simply, "the place." On his last night there, he was woken at midnight by the bell's first strike. He fled immediately into the woods, half mad with fear, writing only that the sound felt like it was splitting bone from marrow. He ran until dawn, and when he returned, the town was gone. Houses were still standing but lifeless. He never went back. He never spoke of it again. But his diary survived, and it is the crack in the wall of silence. This is where the descent truly begins. Because every erased history hides not just loss but control. If an entire town can vanish overnight without headlines, without investigations, without mourning, then who has the power to dictate what reality is remembered and what is discarded? Look closely at 1912. That was the year industrial barons tightened their grip on America's heartland. It was the year new patents for sound transmission were quietly filed, experiments in frequencies the human ear should never hear. It was also the year a secretive group known as the Order of the Silent Bell appears briefly in scattered newspaper mentions, always tied to ritual gatherings and unusual deaths. And then, nothing. Disappeared like the town itself. Do you see the pattern? You and I are standing at the edge of a chasm, staring into a darkness carefully hidden for over a century. And this is only the beginning, the Order of the Silent Bell. That name alone stirs something ancient, doesn't it? Bells that command silence. Bells that erase voices. Bells that toll not for the dead, but for the living who are about to be unmade. When I traced the faint historical fingerprints of this order, I found references older than Illinois, older even than America. In Europe, secret fraternities worshipped sound as divine, believing that certain frequencies could fracture the barrier between this world and the next. One text from Prague in the 1600s described a bell that, when rung at midnight, caused parishioners to fall into trances, their memories rewritten as if their lives had been nothing but dreams. What if the order carried this tradition into the New World, planting their rituals in quiet towns, testing, perfecting, until they found one community to vanish completely? If you think this is too far-fetched, ask yourself, why do governments today fund classified research into sonic weapons, crowd control devices, and frequency manipulation? They are only building on what was already known. But we must return to that Illinois town, because something about its disappearance was too clean, too total. Archaeologists in the 1950s attempted a quiet dig on the farmland where the town once stood. Their notes, preserved only in private family letters, describe unearthed foundations that looked melted, as if stone had been softened and reshaped by heat, yet there was no evidence of fire. They found children's shoes buried together in perfect lines, not scattered, not broken, but arranged. And beneath one church wall, they found fragments of brass fused into the soil, twisted into spirals like vines. These discoveries were never published. Funding was cut overnight. The team dispersed. Some died suddenly in what their families called strange accidents. Do you feel it? Every time someone scratches at this truth, the hand that hit it slams down harder. That hand is still here. There's a deeper pattern. Every culture tells stories of towns swallowed whole, of people vanishing en masse as if the earth itself had rejected them. In Celtic myth, villages would disappear into the mist, taken by the Tuatha De Danann. In Central America, entire tribes vanished overnight, leaving tools still in use, meals still cooking, as if they had simply stepped out and dissolved into thin air. Even the Bible whispers of such vanishings, when God removed people as punishment or as sacrifice. Is it possible that the Illinois town was not unique, but one iteration in a ritual as old as civilization? And if the bell was the trigger, then it wasn't simply a call to prayer, it was a call to surrender, a summoning, a harvest. Think carefully about that word, harvest, because if the people were taken, then taken for what? And by whom? It is here that psychology becomes weapon. Bells are tied to obedience from birth. School bells control when children sit, when they eat, when they're released. Factory bells once dictated the rhythm of workers' lives, chaining them to machines. Church bells told you when to kneel, when to confess, when to fear. This is not coincidence. This is conditioning. The Illinois town was not just erased, it was prepared. For years, its people were trained to move in unison, to obey tones, to surrender identity. That's why the salesman saw a congregation nodding to words they couldn't possibly understand. Their minds were already bent, their will already broken, long before the bell tolled 13 times. What we call disappearance might actually have been the final act of obedience, the town offering itself to the frequency that summoned them. This was no accident. This was mastery of human psychology, weaponized through sound. But here's the first real crack in the wall. In 1987, a retired librarian in Illinois claimed she inherited a locked trunk from her grandfather, one of the archaeologists silenced in the 1950s. Inside, she said, were scorched parish records, melted fragments of a bell clapper, and a single note. The note read, "The 13th toll does not mark midnight. It opens the door." She refused to hand the trunk to authorities, fearing it would be destroyed. For years she spoke of it only to trusted friends. And then, one winter morning, her house burned to the ground. 'Cause unknown. The trunk was never found. But neighbors remember seeing men in dark coats sifting through the ashes before fire investigators even arrived. Who were they? Why did they arrive so quickly? And more importantly, why did they care so much about a trunk from a vanished town? If the door opened that night in 1912, where does it lead? Imagine a door you cannot see, a door that does not swing open in wood or stone, but in vibration, in the hidden architecture of sound. The people of that town may not have walked away, they may have been pulled through. There's a reason ancient priests guarded their chants, why certain tones were considered sacred and forbidden. Sound is a key, and once the wrong hands hold it, reality itself can be unlocked. But here's the darker truth: doors are never one way. If something was taken through on that night in 1912, something else may have come through. Witnesses from neighboring villages claimed they heard not just the tolling, but a roar underneath it, a low vibration that made their teeth ache and their vision blur. Some swore they saw shadows on the horizon, bending unnaturally, stretching toward them. What entered Illinois that night? Was the town sacrificed not only to erase them, but to let something else in? The control system we live in thrives on erasure. If you can make people forget, you can make them repeat. That is why the story was buried. It wasn't just a disappearance, it was a blueprint. In 1912, the barons of industry, the hidden fraternities, the quiet engineers of society, they all learned something in that silent experiment. They learned that entire communities could be conditioned, trained, and surrendered without a single shot fired. And the bell? It was not just a weapon. It was proof of concept. Look at history after 1912. By 1914, the world was at war, young men marching in unison to bugles, drums, and whistles. The conditioning of obedience through sound was exported on a global scale. The Illinois town was the rehearsal. World War I was the performance. Do you see it now? Every tragedy, every conflict, has roots in experiments no one was supposed to survive long enough to tell. But not everyone was erased. In the 1920s, scattered reports emerge of wanderers in Illinois, figures speaking in tongues no one recognized, carrying trinkets of brass twisted like vines. They appeared dazed, malnourished, but when questioned, they asked for the place. One farmer claimed a woman staggered onto his property, clutching a melted crucifix, whispering, "The 13th toll calls us home." She vanished before dawn, leaving only the scorched crucifix behind. Another man, a rail worker, told of meeting a child near the tracks who seemed to flicker in and out of sight when the train whistle blew. The child asked him what year it was, and when told 1924, the boy screamed until he dissolved into thin air. These testimonies were dismissed as madness, drunken tales. But madness has a pattern when enough people share it. These fragments suggest that whatever door opened in 1912 never fully closed. It still leaks. And if the door leaks, then the conditioning also lingers. The bells never stopped. Schools, factories, churches, courthouses, everywhere you go you hear them. Have you ever wondered why the sound of a bell can freeze you, silence you, draw you into compliance? It is because the ritual has been distributed. The conditioning of that town did not end, it was scaled. If the bell could erase one community, then why not an entire nation, even a civilization? Do you think it's coincidence that mass media, radio broadcasts, and the manipulation of sound waves all rose immediately after 1912? Do you think it's chance that today we carry devices in our pockets that vibrate and chime, pulling our attention, bending our will? The bell was not the end. It was the beginning. The town's disappearance was not a failure, it was the seed of the world you live in right now. Now pause and reflect. If you are still here, still listening, it means the conditioning hasn't broken you entirely. You are already different from the thousands who will click away, unsettled but unwilling to face the abyss. But you, yes you, are stepping further into it. And I will ask something of you. To lock in this transformation, to mark yourself as one who chooses awakening over sleep, I want you to write in the comments, not once but twice, the phrase, "The bell will not claim me." Do it twice. Twice for the 12 tolls of midnight. Twice to break the 13th. This is not just for the algorithm. It is a symbolic act, a defiance, a way of declaring, you will not be erased. If enough of us carry this defiance, the conditioning weakens. The shadowed hand that silenced that town will know you are not asleep. And that, my friend, is how resistance begins. In 1932, a decade after those wanderers appeared, a classified memo circulated inside the Department of War. Its subject line was chilling: acoustic weaponry, case study, Illinois, 1912. The memo referred to the vanished town not by name, but as Experiment Field Alpha. It acknowledged loss of populace, but described the event as a success in total compliance. Think about those words. Success in total compliance. This was never about people disappearing. It was about proving obedience could be absolute, irreversible, and beyond conscious choice. The memo vanished into sealed archives, but one carbon copy surfaced in 1978 during a private estate auction. The buyer tried to publish, but his press burned to the ground 2 days later. Every trace destroyed. Only the story survived, whispered through collectors. Do you see the machinery here? Not only the manipulation of sound, but the manipulation of history itself. What you are hearing now is dangerous because it was meant to be buried alongside that town. But suppression always leaves cracks. In the 1940s, Illinois school teachers reported children fainting when exposed to prolonged bell practice. A psychologist investigated, noting that certain frequencies seemed to trigger panic, hallucinations, even temporary amnesia. His report compared these episodes to the Illinois vanishings of 1912. He was dismissed immediately. His license revoked. His life ruined. But his notes, smuggled out by his wife, suggested something more. The children most affected came from families whose grandparents had lived within 50 miles of the vanished town. Bloodlines still haunted by resonance, as though the frequency had imprinted itself into their DNA. If that's true, the experiment never ended. The people did not just vanish, they became carriers. Their blood scattered across generations, waiting for the 13th toll to summon them again. And when it does, how many millions now bear the echo inside their cells? The order of the silent bell never disappeared. They merely changed masks. By the 1950s, they were funding universities under different names, establishing research groups on psychoacoustics and neurological resonance. Behind the dry language was the same intent: obedience through sound. Think of it: every anthem, every pledge, every hypnotic jingle, every siren that slices through your nervous system, they all draw from the same science tested in that Illinois town. And here's the twist: it isn't only about control. It is about initiation. Those who withstand the sound become resistant, harder to command, sharper in awareness. That's why you are here listening still. You have endured the first tolls. You are different. The rest, those who look away, scroll away, laugh away, remain soft clay for shaping. The order is not only harvesting obedience, it is separating the awake from the asleep. And their greatest fear is that too many will wake at once. But I must tell you the darkest part. In 1966, a recording was discovered in an abandoned church outside Chicago. On the reel, 13 bell tolls. At first, nothing unusual, until the final strike. Listeners reported nausea, bleeding ears, seizures. But some reported visions. One man claimed he saw the Illinois town intact, its streets alive, its people smiling. But when he looked closer, their eyes were empty, their mouths whispering in unison, "Come join us." Another swore he saw doors opening across the world, school doors, courthouse doors, factory doors, all swinging at once with the sound of the bell. That reel was seized within hours and the church demolished within a week. Why? Because the 13th toll was not confined to 1912. It echoes, waiting for the right ears, the right minds, the right moment. Perhaps even tonight, in your mind as you hear these words, the door creaks open again. Now ask yourself, why do you think you've never heard of this before? Why do maps erase the town? Why do libraries omit it? Why do professors laugh when you ask? Because the experiment worked, and the control system cannot risk the truth spreading. If people knew obedience could be manufactured, that entire towns could vanish into silence without war or plague, then the illusion of freedom collapses. You would see the strings. You would hear the bell behind every institution's voice. That is why your attention is so precious. That is why they flood your life with noise, distraction, empty sounds that keep you from listening too closely. But you have heard the echo now, and you cannot unhear it. This is where transformation begins. If you are still here, you are no longer merely an observer. You are a witness. And witnesses cannot remain silent forever. Patterns always reveal themselves to those who dare to look. After 1912, vanishings were reported in remote corners of the world, quietly, discreetly, always suppressed. In Siberia, a mining camp abandoned overnight, fire still burning in the hearths. In Chile, a fishing village where boats drifted back without crews. In West Africa, a missionary journal describing an entire parish walking into the jungle at midnight, never returning. Each case connected by a sound. Bells, gongs, drums. Instruments tuned to a rhythm not of worship, but of command. The Illinois town was not unique. It was simply the first experiment on American soil. And because the records were erased, because the story was buried, it allowed the ritual to continue unnoticed. Every disappearance dismissed as folklore, every whisper discredited. But if you stack the reports together, the outline of a larger plan emerges. Entire populations conditioned for harvest, scattered across time, waiting to be claimed. The deeper you go, the more you see the hand of institutions. In the 1970s, declassified CIA files revealed research into acoustic influence, programs designed to disorient crowds or induce compliance. Buried in those documents were references to resonant triggers and ancestral conditioning. An agent even noted, case studies suggest inherited susceptibility in Midwest subjects, Illinois 1912 unresolved. Stop and think. The intelligence agencies of a modern superpower were still tracking a vanished town from half a century earlier. Why? Because they knew the conditioning never truly died. It passed through families, through generations, encoded in the very marrow of descendants. Perhaps even you, listening now, are linked by blood or resonance. Perhaps your unease is not imagination, but memory surfacing. The system counts on you doubting yourself, dismissing the shiver on your spine as nothing. But doubt is the leash. Awareness is the blade that cuts it. And here is where the conspiracy shifts from hidden history to your daily life. Think of the devices surrounding you: phones, televisions, alarms, sirens. Each emits tones, frequencies, pulses. Some calm you. Some jar you awake. Some hook your attention until hours slip away. These are not accidents of design. They are echoes of the bell. Each sound engineered to condition, to remind your nervous system of obedience. The tragedy of the Illinois town is not frozen in 1912. It is alive in the way you react when your phone chimes, the way you stop walking when a siren wails, the way your mind blanks when the school bell rings. You carry the experiment in your behavior, every single day. This is the true horror. They do not need the 13th toll anymore. They have placed 1,000 small bells in your pocket, on your wall, in your city. And you ring them yourself, every time you obey. But here is the twist they never wanted you to realize. Control always carries the seed of resistance. Every bell that commands you is also a reminder of its existence. The very sound meant to condition you can also awaken you, if you learn to hear it differently. In ancient traditions, initiates were taught to endure the most dissonant tones until they found clarity within the chaos. What was once a weapon became a tool of transformation. The Illinois town was trained to obey, but you can train yourself to resist. And resistance begins with recognition. When you hear the chime, the tone, the toll, pause. Do not move. Do not obey. Simply notice. Awareness breaks conditioning. And once awareness spreads, the spell shatters. That is why this knowledge is buried, because if enough people refuse to answer the bell, the entire system collapses. Now understand this. Survival of knowledge depends on voice. You are not here just to consume a story. You are here to carry it. This town's memory has been erased from history books, from maps, from public consciousness, but it survives here in your mind right now. And that makes you dangerous. The institutions thrive when you remain silent, when you scroll past, when you dismiss what you feel stirring in your gut. But if you speak it, if you pass it on, if you anchor it in collective memory, the erasure fails. That is why I ask you, subscribe to this channel, because together we rebuild the memory they tried to erase. This is not entertainment. This is preservation. Each witness adds weight. Each subscriber strengthens the signal. They cannot erase a chorus. They cannot silence a bell rung in defiance. And the moment you decide to remember, you are no longer their subject. You become their interruption. But awakening is never without cost. Every truth carried has a weight, and the darker the truth, the heavier it presses on the soul. Those who dug too far into the Illinois disappearance often paid the price. The salesman who escaped that night. His diary ends abruptly, mid-sentence, as if the ink itself bled from fear. The archaeologists in the 1950s. Most dead by accident, the rest silenced by ruin. The librarian who protected the trunk, consumed by fire. This pattern is not coincidence. It is warning. The closer you draw to the 13th toll, the louder it echoes in your life. You will begin to notice sounds differently. The ringing of a phone will feel sharp, invasive. A clock striking midnight may stir unease in your bones. And some of you, those already linked by blood or resonance, may even dream of a town with empty streets and doors ajar. If this happens, understand you have not gone mad. You have merely heard the bell. The question then is survival. How do you carry forbidden awareness without being consumed? History shows us two paths. Silence or defiance. Silence was the path chosen by survivors who fled. They buried the memory, passed it only in whispers, lived in constant fear of the 13th toll. They survived but as shadows of themselves. Defiance, however, that is the rarer path. To face the sound and refuse obedience. To use awareness as a shield. In occult traditions, this is called holding the tone. It is said that if you can remain conscious inside the 13th toll, the door that opens cannot take you. Instead, you see through it. You glimpse the machinery of control, the faces behind the erasure. But be warned, such vision is not without scars. To witness is to change. And change cannot be undone. Now think of your own life. Have you noticed how unease strikes not only at night, but in sudden silences? How sometimes the world around you feels paused, as if waiting for something to break. That is the bell's shadow. A world trained to obey the rhythm of sound, left adrift in its absence. This is why silence terrifies so many. It is not emptiness, it is a reminder of the control humming underneath. That town in Illinois lived inside the rhythm until the final toll swallowed them whole. But you, living a century later, are inside the same experiment. The difference is that you can see the strings. And when you see strings, you can cut them. If enough people resist, the 13th toll loses its power. The bell does not command, it crumbles. But only if you face the silence instead of fleeing from it. There is something else buried in those parish records. A final line, half burned but still legible. It reads, "The bell will toll again when the century turns." The last toll was 1912. A century later was 2012. Did you notice what happened in that year? Across the globe, uprisings, protests, revolts, people pouring into streets as if stirred by an invisible summons. Some claimed it was political. Some claimed it was economic. But beneath it all was a vibration, a stirring. The bell was ringing again, not in one town but everywhere. Some obeyed, falling into chaos and despair. Others resisted, demanding freedom. The experiment scaled beyond a single town into the entire world. And if the pattern holds, the next toll is not far. Do you feel it? The unease in the air, the sharpening tension. The door creaks open once more. This is why your role matters. You are not a spectator to a ghost story. You are living inside its continuation. The institutions perfected their method. The bells are digital now, embedded in screens, hidden in tones only your subconscious hears. Every notification, every alarm, every broadcast, it is the modern 13th toll rung quietly, invisibly. And every time you obey without thinking, the door opens a little wider. But every act of awareness slams it shut. You have a choice now: drift with the rhythm until you dissolve, or resist and hold your identity intact. Remember, obedience is the harvest. Awareness is the weapon. The Illinois town was erased because they never chose. You listening here have the choice in your hands. And once chosen, it cannot be taken from you. The bell is ringing again. Will you answer, or will you stand? Every system of control has beneficiaries. The bell is no different. To ask who profits from obedience is to pull the mask off power itself. In 1912, it was the industrial barons who watched from the shadows, testing whether sound could command an entire town. Today, it is the same families, the same bloodlines, only hidden behind corporations, governments, and institutions. They are not worshippers of the bell, they are its architects. They understood that war and violence were crude tools. But sound? Invisible, deniable, perfect. A bell leaves no fingerprints, only compliance. That is why the Illinois town was buried. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded. Too well. Too perfectly. And those who stood behind it knew that the experiment could not be made public. They needed time to refine, to scale, to spread the bell across the globe without anyone noticing. And that is exactly what they did. By the late 20th century, the conditioning had matured. Schools, workplaces, militaries, all synchronized by tones and alarms. But the architects were not content with obedience alone. They wanted transformation. They wanted the 13th toll not just to erase a town, but to remake a species. Imagine an entire population rewired by frequency, their identities dissolved, their resistance neutralized, their memories pliable. The Illinois disappearance was the seed. The digital age is the harvest. Every beep, every buzz, every alert is part of the same design, slowly weaving obedience into your nervous system. The bell no longer needs to toll 13 times. It tolls every second you check your screen, every moment you obey without thought. The architects do not need you gone. They need you remade. And unless you resist, you already are. But here is the paradox the architects fear. Awareness spreads faster than obedience. A single person awake is a spark. 100 awake is a fire. 1,000 awake is a storm. If too many hear the bell and refuse to bow, the entire system falters. The architects cannot erase billions, not without revealing themselves. That is why they silence, ridicule, and discredit anyone who speaks of the vanished town. They cannot risk the spark becoming a blaze. Yet even now you feel it, don't you? The unease that hums beneath the surface of modern life, the sense that something is fundamentally broken. That hum is the bell. That unease is the fracture in the system. And through that fracture, light pours. This is why you are here listening. You were meant to be asleep, but the sound woke you instead. That makes you dangerous. That makes you necessary. Understand this. The architects of the bell are not gods. They are men who fear losing control. Their rituals are not infallible, their conditioning not unbreakable. The Illinois town vanished because no one resisted. But resistance is contagious. In secret archives, there are reports of experiments that failed, towns where the 13th toll cracked but did not claim. In those rare cases, people resisted, stood their ground, held their awareness. Those communities were not erased, but they were changed. They became harder to control, more difficult to manipulate. That is why such stories never reach you. They are proof the bell can be broken. And if a single town can resist, then so can you. So can we. The 13th toll is not destiny, it is invitation. The question is whether you accept or defy. But defiance comes with danger. Once you choose awareness, the system notices. You may feel it already, small disruptions, strange coincidences, a sense of being watched. This is not paranoia. It is the reaction of a system designed to suppress anomaly. You are no longer compliant, and that makes you visible. The Illinois town was erased not because they failed, but because their obedience was too perfect. Your defiance makes you imperfect, unpredictable. And unpredictability terrifies the architects. That is why they chase it down, silence it, extinguish it. Yet here is the secret. The more you resist, the more others see you, the more the illusion fractures. You may be marked, but you are also multiplied. One witness becomes two, two become 10, 10 become thousands. And once the chorus rises, even the 13th toll cannot erase it. The architects designed the bell to erase, but they never planned for remembrance. Memory is their greatest enemy. And tonight you remember. You have walked with me through the streets of the vanished Illinois town. You have heard the 13th toll that silenced lives and carved absence into history. And now you see it, don't you? The same silence echoes in our world today. The alarms that guide your every hour. The tones that dictate your work, your sleep, your obedience. Each is a descendant of the bell, and each is a chain. But memory breaks chains. By remembering the forbidden, by daring to speak of it, you unmake their ritual. You do what the town could not. And that is why you are here, listening to words they never wanted spoken aloud. The greatest lie they tell is this, that you are powerless. That you are too small, too insignificant, to resist. But history proves the opposite. Every empire that believed itself eternal has crumbled. Every tyrant who called himself invincible has rotted in the ground. Power survives only by convincing you it cannot be challenged. And the bell, this invisible empire of sound, is no different. The Illinois town was erased because it bowed. You will not bow. You cannot. To bow now is to be devoured. To resist is to reclaim. That resistance begins in small acts, noticing, questioning, remembering. But it grows louder and louder, until even the architects cannot drown it. You are not powerless. You are the bell they fear, the sound that breaks their silence. So ask yourself, what is the 13th toll in your life? The invisible command that makes you obey without thought? Is it the alarm on your phone? The deadlines that choke you? The endless cycle of distractions that numb your spirit? Each is a toll. Each is a test. But awareness transforms the toll into choice. You may obey. You may resist. The Illinois town had no choice, but you do. That is the difference. And that is why you are dangerous. The moment you hear the bell and refuse to move, you break the cycle. You prove the architects are not gods, but men hiding behind machinery and myth. That is the truth they fear. That is why they bury stories like this one. But it is too late. You have already heard, and now the responsibility is yours. Do not let this vanish from your mind as the Illinois town vanished from the map. Carry it. Speak it. Pass it on in whispers, in warnings, in questions. You are the fracture in the system, the anomaly they cannot contain. They cannot erase all of us, not if we refuse to be silent. If you have felt the weight of this story, if you sense the truth pulsing beneath the lies, then write in the comments now, the bell will not own me. The bell will not own me. Write it twice. Let the architects see it, let the algorithm spread it, let the world hear the sound of resistance. And while you're here, subscribe. This is only the beginning, and what comes next will make tonight feel like a whisper before the storm.